So this is a request from Door, and we are doing the tier list of all of the Singularities, Epic of Remnants, and Lost Belts. And I assume Traum is also on here and Heian Kyo probably, even though those are not technically any of those. So we're just going to go ahead and roll right through it. I have not read most of these in years, so you're just kind of getting my raw impressions. Fuyuki goes to D tier. The only thing keeping it from E tier is the fact that it sets up a lot of things going forward, but like objectively speaking, it's the tutorial. It is minimal gameplay, minimal complexity. It takes like 10 minutes and it has minimal interesting story on its own merit. Now, granted, Olga Marie shows up again later, and like her being tossed into Caldeus is important later. But just sitting down and reading Fuyuki, from what I recall, I was like, yes, this is the opening. This is just kind of bog standard, the world is going on fire kind of stuff. So it doesn't really have a whole lot going for it. Orleans is going to go up to B tier. Yeah, I can't in good faith put it in A tier, even though it does have Phantom of the Opera. But it's saved from the lower tiers because it has a lot of interesting concepts, especially being introduced so early as it was. I really liked what we had going with like Gilles de Rais using the Grail to summon an alter version of Jeanne d'Arc, which shouldn't be possible, and her being like hell-bent on revenge because that's the image that he has for her. I think that's really cool. So I'm putting that in B tier. Septim, straight to the bottom tier, straight to E tier. Septim has almost nothing redeeming about it. I do not remember a single element of its plot. I do not remember a single boss fight. I don't remember anything that I found really that interesting about it. Septim was just plain garbage. The only real thing is what Karm was saying here, is Boudica getting done dirty. Like, you're really gonna introduce Boudica and not have her be a prominent player in the Roman Singularity as like an antagonistic force or anything? Nah. Septim probably is going to be the lowest on this tier list. Unless something surprises me as I go through and remember these main story chapters, I do not see anything outranking Septim for how bad I think it is. Okeanos goes into D tier, below Fuyuki. Honestly, man, early Fate Grand Order was rough. We've talked about this before, but boy, oh boy. What was there that was notable about Okeanos? I mean, Heracles was there, I think. Was Jason introduced in Okeanos? He might have been. I think he was. I remember Medea Lily. Medea Lily was cool. Don't really remember much about the gameplay. I remember there were wyverns. That's about it. London is where Fate Grand Order kind of starts to pick up. I'm gonna put London in the B tier. It's a low B tier, to be honest, because it had some interesting story elements and it had some fun gimmicks, but also the story felt very incomplete, especially towards the ending where it's just like, oh hey, Solomon is a thing, and also Tamamo, and Alter Lancer Saber, and Tesla, and Kintoki. Just like random bullshit go. Why? I remember it, which means it's better than a lot of the others, but I don't really remember it for good reasons. I just remember it. E Pluribus Unum, we're taken to the top of B tier. I liked E Pluribus Unum a lot, actually. For one thing, I can remember elements of the plot, like specific elements of the plot. I remember marching across to go to Alcatraz to try to rescue Sita. I remember, obviously, Thomas Edison and his army of Edison bots. Those were fun. I remember Queen Maeve and her summoning Ku Alter. The gameplay was pretty good. Nothing outstanding, but still pretty fun. And the story was good, so it doesn't stand out for me, but it's good. It's absolutely passable. Camelot is our first A tier contender here. Camelot was great, man. Camelot was where the difficulty spike happened in early Fate Grand Order. Anyone who was here for year 1 remembers the infamous, community outcry about, like, how are we supposed to beat Gawain without, like, specific sets of servants. It was a really, really big jump in the complexity. What's this? Yes, Nightingale. It was a really big jump in the complexity, and I think that was a good thing. That really meant that a lot of the more nuanced parts of Fate Grand Order's gameplay system could come out, and that meant a lot more fun. So Camelot, in terms of gameplay, really good. In terms of story, it brought us the Lion King. It brought us, like, an event in the main story in which the Grail kind of stopped being the big thing. Hey, what's up, Goomba? Happy Thursday. It brought us the first Singularity, the first main story chapter, where, like, we kind of got the Grail and still had a bigger issue to deal with. And I liked that, because all of the previous Singularities were like, oh, we gotta get the Grail is the problem, the Grail is, the cause of the Singularity, blah, 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 we got the Grail, yay, move on. So I thought Camelot did really, really well in that respect. Babylonia is one of, I think, 3, probably, off the top of my head, that's going straight into EX tier. Babylonia, up until last week, was my favorite story chapter, bar none. Babylonia, A, introduces really awesome characters. Quetzalcoatl, Merlin, Tiamat, Ereshkigal, Castor Ku, Siduri. Like, the cast of Babylonia is excellent. It does the same thing that Camelot does, where, like, yeah, we got the Grail, we've got bigger problems, but the bigger problems are, like, bigger problems. This was the first beast that we fight in Fate Grand Order, and that fight was fun. That fight was really, really fun to do. They had a gimmick, and it made solos possible. It made unique approaches to the fight possible. That was really, really cool. I loved that. I got to Phantom solo the Tiamat fight. I loved that. It was so cool. So that, on the gameplay perspective, is great. Going back to the story, not only does it do the thing that I like, where there's kind of an escalation of the threat, but it also had a major tone shift halfway through, where the moment that switch happens, it becomes a horror show for a little bit. Like, all of the Lamu showing up is frightening, and Tiamat advancing with the Sea of Mud as everything is getting destroyed. Like, this was the first time in the main story chapter that I was like, wow, this feels hopeless. I feel genuinely hopeless. And I think that that's a really good feeling to instill in this kind of, medium. So I just have so many good things to say about Babylonia. It is amazing. It was a real step forward for Fate Grand Order. Grand Temple of Time Solomon will go into B tier. I'll put it above Orleans and below E Pluribus Unum. It wasn't really much of a main story chapter. It was kind of the climax of part 1. The gameplay was good. I liked the boss fights, but story-wise, it was kind of a fan service moment for what the game was supposed to end on. Like, it was supposed to be the big finale, and I think it succeeded in that pretty well. And I would rank it higher if the game did not then continue, specifically because of Mash. Mash sacrificed herself. Mash made a meaningful sacrifice, and bringing her back immediately just really rug pulls the emotional impact of that moment in the climax, and I just really don't love when they do that. But it also gets extra points for the bond point thing, where the higher level your bond is with your servant, the higher the attack bonus that they got during Temple of Time Solomon. I liked that. I really, really liked that, because it meant that there was a value in the time that you have invested with your favorite servants. Perhaps, Jalter would have been a strong servant for me to have in Fate Grand Order at that time at the end of year 1. But Phantom had double damage. I got to really benefit from the investment that I put into him. I love that. That's really, really good mechanical integration with the story, especially with it being what was supposed to be the finale. When it was supposed to be the end, a celebration of what the players have achieved, I think that that was really fitting thematically. So All of that together, you get a solid B for me. Shinjuku A tier, baby. Boy, did I love Shinjuku. Hang on, it goes above Camelot. Shinjuku was some hot shit. First of all, the setting was really unique. The prior 7 singularities were a little bit more rooted in a fantasy world or in a historical world. Shinjuku just kind of flips the script there and is like, we've got a sci-fi speculative current world where there is no good. Everyone is evil. Everyone's a scumbag. And that was really cool, especially showing up in this singularity and having it be, we don't have friends. We have to rely on people, but we can't really trust them, you know? And then that gets upped to 11 when we introduce my main man, Moriarty. Moriarty was an amazing introduction. His character was really, really good. It fit the themes and the tone. His design is fantastic. And not just him, but the cast of Shinjuku in general was really good. Moriarty, Salter, Jalter, this introduced Lobo. Like, we really got some good stuff with Shinjuku. We got some really fun story moments too. We got the cross-dressing scene where Master has to, you know, dress up as alternate genders. We got the finale in which all of the like phantom spirits or whatever show up, and we got references to like Hercule Poirot and Sherlock Holmes, and yeah, Shakespeare, because King Lear I remember being referenced. So all of my literary passions got referenced in this singularity, which, you know, I just geek out about that stuff. And then to top it all off, Phantom of the Opera is a major player here, and he gets his own musical theme for it. Oh, hell yeah. We're taking this out of A tier and into EX tier. This was fantastic. Love me some Shinjuku. Still want to see it animated really, really bad. King Lear was the Gollum fight, yeah. Agartha. All right. Are you guys ready for it? You ready for Agartha? B tier above Orleans. Agartha wasn't that bad in terms of its gameplay. A lot of you have heard me say this before. Agartha's story, I will agree. Utter garbage, bottom tier story. Agartha's gameplay, however, peak. Some of my favorite up to that point in Fate Grand Order. If I was ranking these singularities on gameplay alone, I would put Agartha in EX tier, because it had a lot of really fun gimmick fights. It had a lot of good story and gameplay integration. I really liked the Heracles Megalos boss fight. I really liked the Scheherazade menagerie fight. Like, there were a lot of really fun moments in the actual gameplay. The story, however, has a lot of objectionable moments. With that said, let's consider the cast. It introduced some really fun characters. Again, Heracles Megalos is not exactly the same as Heracles, but he's kind of similar, so let's push him aside. But we got Penth. I love Penth. I think Penth is an awesome character. I really enjoy Fergus Lily conceptually, perhaps not in execution. We got Columbus, and Columbus is not a great person historically. Columbus, canonically in Fate Grand Order, is an absolute dirtbag. Makes him an entertaining character. I like him as a villain. He's one of those characters that you love to hate. So you put all of that together, I really can't put Agartha any lower than B. It has a lot of flaws, but it does a lot of things right. So it's a solid B for me, honestly. Ooh, Shimosa. It's fighting for a spot in C tier right now, but I don't know if it's gonna earn it. It will earn it. It will earn a spot in C tier. I put it in C tier because gameplay first, I hated it. Oh boy. I still have PTSD about the frickin' low-level, no-skills, forced support Musashi on some of these boss fights. It took me months to beat the Samgatra and Kalasutra hell fight. The fact that those words are burned into my brain when I do not understand what they actually mean, I can feel my blood pressure spiking already. So gameplay-wise, not a fan. Story-wise, barely remember anything about it. I know it was like a proto-Lost Belt, but that didn't really make sense until the Lost Belt arc really began. And I'm not really crazy about a lot of the primarily Japanese set stories in the first place, which, now that I think about it, this was the first main story chapter set in Japan. Kind of surprising, unless Shinjuku was. Oh, Shinjuku obviously was, but I don't count Shinjuku. It wasn't like a historical fan service Japan in the way that Fate usually is. Oh yeah, Fuyuki too. Fuyuki barely counts as a story chapter, to be honest. But anyway, it doesn't really suit my personal preferences. I don't find the Japanese-centric stories very appealing. So, with that said, it doesn't really do it for me in terms of story. So how about characters? I mean, it introduces Danzo, who I like, but not that much. It introduces Chiyome, who I don't really care about. Musashi already existed, I think. I don't believe Shimosa introduced Musashi. So that really only leaves one character, and that is the one thing that is saving Shimosa from D or E tier, and that is Ashiya Doman. That is my man, Doman himself. This man is amazing. I love him. I was gripped by him as a villain. He was just fantastic. He was so fun. Every time he was on screen, I was like, yes, yes, give me more of this psychopath. I love him. So for that, Shimosa gets a C tier. It had some things that I really, really didn't like, but nothing that was horribly egregious. Salem, EX tier. I'm changing this to S tier. I get why it's named the way it is, but I'm changing it to S tier. Salem, baby. Love me some Salem. First of all, I really enjoyed the pacing of it. I feel like it cut out a lot of the fluff, with the exception of the theater bits. The theater bits didn't need to be there for the most part, but also I'm a theater nerd, so it gets a pass. So story-wise, tonally, it leaned into a what's the guy's name who does Lovecraft. It leaned into a Lovecraftian horror vibe and did that in a way that I think was really successful. It has a slow burn of dread and discomfort that really culminates very nicely in a climax that feels off-putting and alien, but without breaking away from what Fate Grand Order does very well. And like, I will never forget the moment that Realm, I believe was his name, like with the bird head. That was so cool. Small stakes, horror, low fantasy, a story unlike any other in Fate Grand Order. Very well put, Door. So Salem succeeds with flying colors in the story and tone and theme department. So let's talk about the characters it introduces. I mean, Abigail Williams was the first character I ever saved money for. I love Abigail Williams. She also introduced the Foreigner class, which for the wider Fate Grand Order story ends up being very, very important. So that's important. Who else did we get during this? Oh, I don't know. Only Queen of Sheba, the character with the best voice acting in the whole damn game. I love Queen of Sheba. She is fantastic. She is so fun. She's so fun. Like, this story just nailed every aspect. It made Sanson a fun character. Great. So then that leaves us with the gameplay. Now, the gameplay, I will concede, didn't do anything outstanding for most of the chapter, but I will always remember the Abby fight at the very end. I don't think she had guts. I think she just had like looping HP bars, and it felt very appropriate for the finale of that particular story. So does the gameplay of Salem earn it a spot in the S tier? No, but everything as an aggregate absolutely does. Loved Salem. Loved Salem. And so you look at that and like, dang, 2 out of the 4 Epic of Remnant chapters earn top tier places here. I think that says something. Where would you put Seraph? I'd put Seraph in A tier. I can't add it manually, but I would put Seraph in A tier for sure. CCC was really, really fun. I liked the music, first of all. Soundtrack in CCC was top tier. The gameplay was really fun. I like mission-based events, and so I was enjoying it. I also have a special place in my heart for CCC because it was the first event that I streamed, which is wild. But like, I don't know, I just think back and like, that's where this started. I would not be here today if I hadn't made that choice back then doing CCC. And so to me, CCC is wrapped up in what has been a fundamentally life-changing decision and a life-changing moment for me. So in my heart, I could not put it anywhere less than A tier. Still no melt, right? But I've got Passion Lip, and I do love me Passion Lip. What is this? The Lost Belt Prologue. Interesting. Honestly, A tier. I was really, really intrigued by the Lost Belt Prologue. I thought it was really strong. I thought it made a lot of strong choices. It shook up the status quo in a way that I think is good for storytelling. You know, we were used to Chaldea. Well, all of that's out the window. Romani's gone, so we get this new guy who sucks, this Gordolf guy who's just an absolute jackass. We got this Koyanskaya woman who's really hot, but she's like clearly a sadist. Rasputin Kirei is here for some reason. And he's going to straight up murder Da Vinci. He's going to donut her. That was a shock. And then we get this like alien priestess, and we get the Lost Belts and the bleaching of the earth. There was no gameplay to talk about, so I can't really say anything about that. But like, man, I thought the Lost Belt Prologue was really strong. I really, really liked it. Anastasia. A tier. Not quite as strong as Camelot. Better than E Pluribus Unum, though. First of all, it holds the record for the longest single stream boss fight that I've ever done, which was the Anastasia boss fight right at the very end. Thank you, Quetzalcoatl, for finally breaking me out of that. That took me nearly 8 hours to do. But I don't look back at that and think, oh, that was a miserable experience. I enjoyed it a lot. It introduced the concept of the Lost Belts really nicely. It had a lot of fun characters. It had Billy the Kid. It had Atalanta Alter. It had Anastasia, who I came to really like. But like, we all know who really matters in Lost Belt 1. I will never forget seeing Ivan the Terrible for the first time and having to fight him while Salieri is playing the Dies Irae. So good. Incredible. Fantastic story. Oh my god, that was cool. I'm just getting giddy thinking about it right now. I got goosebumps, man. Loved it. So that earns it a good spot, very, very high. But also, taking a step back from my like personal preferences about like big monster servants and edgy servants with Ivan and Salieri, Kaduk is a standout character for me. Even as early as Lost Belt 1, I looked at Kaduk and I said, you are a literary counterpoint to me. As the last master of humanity, as the protagonist of this game, you and I come from the same stock. We started in the same place, and you are a dark reflection of who I am. And I think that's really, really good. I'm really glad he stuck around after that. Now we get to the sad ones. Lost Belt 2, Gotendammerung. It is saved from the bottomest of bottom tiers, but C tier is as high as I can give it. I enjoyed the gameplay. I remember the Zigguard fight. I remember the Surtur fight. And in terms of character, I quite enjoyed Napoleon. He had a fun speech at the end. Didn't love the story. Didn't love most of the rest of the gameplay. Was not enthused by most of the characters. Also, it was a little bit boring to me to have a second Lost Belt in a row where it's all icy and cold. Yeah, part of it's on fire, but like, come on, we did this. We just got out of Russia. Why are we in icy, frozen over Scandinavia? This is the same old, same old. Yeah, we got Scotty, who, in terms of the meta, is a great character, But in terms of character, I never really liked Skahak in the first place, so why are we making the Lost Belt King here, who is supposed to be this cool, unique new character, just an alt of a character I already don't care about? Like... And then even on top of that, like, she's just kind of a deadpan character. She has no enthusiasm. So, I can't give Goten Damarung anything even better. And then finally, the Cryptor. I mean, what did Ophelia do? She used her Sirius Light. That was cool. She didn't have any lasting impact. I barely remember anything about her except she had an eye patch. She just didn't do anything. So Goten Damarung just sits there for me. And then Sin goes right next to it. Does it go above or below? It's gonna go below. And here's why. Gerda was a better companion than Boy. That's the only reason here. But, like, I at least remember some more story elements about Sin. I liked the Lost Belt King more in Lost Belt 3 than Lost Belt 2. And I especially liked his interactions with Koyanskaya, Koryan Chihuahua. That was fun. A lot of the other characters that got introduced, though, I mean, like, Yume Ren's pretty. I didn't really care for Akuta's story very much. Red Hair is fun. He's funny. He's good comic relief. Chen Gong exists. Shang Yu was a character. I don't know. I liked the idea of the Wall of China going around the Earth. That was cool. Oh, and I did like the intro of Lost Belt 3. I liked Koyanskaya sneaking into Chaldea and trying to poison me, and then I only get half poisoned, and then Gordolf also gets half poisoned, and so, like, our goal for going into this Lost Belt is to get us unpoisoned. I thought that was fun. That was a fun idea, and it manifested in terms of gameplay in an interesting way. So you know what? I have some words of praise for Lost Belt 3. Lost Belt 4, Yuga Kshetra. Now we're talking. It goes above Orleans. It goes above Agartha. Yeah, right in the middle of B tier. Yuga Kshetra had a really interesting story idea. I liked very much the notion of, like, the world constantly getting destroyed and then built back from the ground up exactly the same except without certain aspects, and nobody remembering that. I think that's really cool. It's conceptually frightening, but from a storytelling perspective, it led to a really interesting dynamic wherein, like, we recognize that things are not exactly right, you know? We recognize that it's weird that Asha doesn't really have a full grasp of her family, right? And it's weird that these people don't, like, really understand what's going on here. And the ticking clock constantly, you know, compressing the amount of time between these resets, that was cool. You know what? Actually, I gotta put Yuga Kshetra even higher. I can't quite put it in A tier, but it goes right at the top of B tier. If I can... There we go. Because now that I think about it and I'm really remembering, it had one of my favorite story moments in any of the Lost Belts. Certainly my favorite story moment up to that point, which was Janako doing the thing in the box. Like, the cube being there from the beginning of the story and being like, what's this weird thing? And then the payoff for it coming later and it being a time travel story where she spent, like, 10,000 years in isolation for the good of humanity. What a cool moment. What an awesome moment. And then we bring it to the Cryptor, which, I mean, Pepe is my favorite Cryptor. How could he not be? Look at this absolute Chad. Look at this flamboyant god. I love, love, love him. Pepe is the best Cryptor by a country mile. He's so fun. So we've definitely gotta keep Yuga Kshetra towards the top end of B tier. What keeps it from A tier for me, however, is A, I'm not invested really in the Indian mythology, so I wasn't super excited by, you know, Karna and Arjuna and everybody else that appeared there. And I don't really remember a whole lot of the other characters sparking a lot of enthusiasm for me. I didn't really care too much for Lakshmi Bai. Didn't really care too much for Jinako, apart from her main standout moment. Who else even appeared in Lost Belt 4? Oh, Ashwataman. Yeah, Ashwataman. So it has some things that drag it down for me, but overall, I thought very, very strong. Atlantis. Atlantis C tier? D tier? Upper end of D tier. And this one to me is not so much the fault of the storytelling or the characters as it is the fact that it was just tacitly incomplete. Atlantis was not ready to release when it did. And when I think about a lot of the Lost Belts, I think about the finale, the climax. And the climax being such a letdown for me really drags down the entire experience. What do I mean? I mean that Odysseus, who is this character who's built up from the beginning of the Lost Belt, like, oh, we're fighting Odysseus, which, like, Odysseus is kind of a big deal. In terms of literary history, Odysseus is a huge accomplishment in human storytelling. He is wrapped up in a huge part of Greek mythology. And if you're giving me Odysseus in a story that is rooted in Greek myth, and you're making him the villain, you had better let me fight him. And instead, the Odysseus boss fight is just a Cerberus, is just some random generic mob. That is deeply disappointing to me. That is deeply disappointing. What saves it from being lower is that I really, really enjoyed the characters otherwise. Charlotte, standout character. Absolute standout character for me. Loved her story, loved her character interactions with us as a protagonist. Jason is an accomplishment for me. Like, Jason occupies the same place as Gordolf for me, where, like, deeply flawed character who nonetheless has integrity and showcases it. And you understand why they are a leader. Even though they are flawed, they both showcase genuine leadership in very, very strong ways. Gameplay, the Clearanomia was a fun idea, but it got boring to me after a while, I think. So, overall, I just did not find a whole lot of enthusiasm for Atlantis. The last thing for me is all that Atlantis was a prelude to the next chapter. We got this whole ass story chapter that was just to get us into the actual part of the Lost Belt. I had been complaining for quite some time that the Lost Belts are bloated and that there is too much text. I think that the story could have been fine if we had just entered Atlantis, or if we had entered Olympus. If Atlantis didn't exist, they would have had to rewrite like 6 lines and the story would have succeeded. So, was Atlantis really meaningful in the long term? I don't think so super well. So, I understand that this one is probably the hottest take of this tier list. I stand by this. Olympus, on the other hand, I thought was really good. I don't think I can put it higher than Yuga Kshetra, though. I can put it higher than Agartha, for sure. I can put it higher than E Pluribus Unum, too. Olympus, I really, really liked. I liked the story. I liked the whole thing with the twins. And I liked the notion of, like, oh, humanity has stalled because we've peaked. Like, that's the thing with the Lost Belts, is every Lost Belt introduces a version of humanity where humanity's capacity for growth is done. And in most of the other Lost Belts up to this point, it's because, like, some cataclysm happened. You know, the whole thing with the furries in Lost Belt 1, the whole thing in Lost Belt 2 with there only being, like, 100 villages of 100 people each. Like, that's all that humanity is, and it's being babysat by the giants and by Scotty. Lost Belt 3, all that there is Qin Shi Huang, and there is nothing else. Lost Belt 4, cycles of death and rebirth that don't allow for any progress. Lost Belt 5, though? Utopia. Actual utopia. And that means that there's no more progress to be made. There's no more births that happen. There's no more deaths to mourn. There's no more hurdles to overcome. And so humanity just stagnates because of that. I thought that was a really unique and interesting concept. Gameplay-wise, I liked the boss fights. I remember the boss fights in that really, really firmly. They stand out in my mind. I remember the Zeus boss fight, where we had to do Black Grail mash in order to succeed. I remember the boss fight against Aphrodite, who, despite being a caster, was... Oh, no, not Aphrodite. Who was the other one? I can't remember her name, but I remember the fight. Demeter. Thank you. Demeter. Yeah, the Demeter boss fight, who, despite being a caster, her patterns were consistent, and so we could plan around it and have a really fun, challenging fight with Phantom of the Opera. So Demeter, really fun. Characters that were introduced. I mean, Kirstaria as the Cryptor does a fantastic job. He's a really, really fun character. He has a really great showing. He was a boss fight himself, which was really cool. It also introduced my main man, Barrel Gut, and made him de facto the most detestable of the Cryptors. Fantastic moment. Loved that. Who else did we have? We had Europa. We had... The actual introduced servants in Olympus don't really stand out in my mind. I can't really remember who else showed up. Canis? Oh yeah, Canis. That's true. But Canis was already known, right? Muramasa? But like, who was new? Oh, you forgot the moment with Canis, Gordolph, and the croissant? Yeah, that was great. That was a fantastic scene. Yeah, I can't really remember any of the other servants that got summonable during that. Oh yeah, Grand Roma. Yeah, forgot about that one. So, yeah, that's my general assessment of 5.2. It has a lot going for it, but it doesn't have anything that, like, elevates it straight up into A or S tier. Heian Kyo! Wow, dude. I can't put it above Septum, but wow, what a fall from grace. What a fall from grace for Domon. One of my favorite antagonists in the game. And even that cannot save Heian Kyo from the pit of E tier. This is the only main story chapter that I did not read on stream. I got like 10 or 15 chapters into it, and I was like, man, this is boring. It is not interesting. It is not fun. It's not doing anything that I care about. Yeah, I guess it had Taira no Kage Kyo, and she's cool. I don't care about Kintoki. I don't care about Raiko. We have seen these characters so many times already. I am, like I said about Shimosa, I don't really care too much about the Japanese historical stories. The Guda Gudas, Heian Kyo, Shimosa. Like, these ones just don't appeal to me personally, and so combine my personal subjective taste with the, I would say, rather objective poor quality of the writing here. Wow, dude. What a disappointment. What a disappointment. I was really excited for Heian Kyo, and it did not deliver. Camelot. Or not Camelot, sorry. Avalon. Avalon Le Fay. Yep. Better than Shinjuku. Better than Shinjuku. Better than Salem. Not quite as good as Babylon. Or Babylonia, rather. I mean, Camelot has one problem. There is only one problem that I have with Camelot, and that is that it is too goddamn long. Oh my god, get an editor. Get a few editors. This Lost Belt was like 85 years. I visibly aged doing it. But at least I was enjoying myself pretty much the entire way through. Like, the characters it introduced were incredible. Off the top of my head, Oberon, Castoria, Morgan, Baoban Shi, Melazine, Black Dog, Fairy Knight Gawain, Aurora, the dog guy whose name I can't remember, the elf guy whose name I can't remember, like Woodwoes. Yeah, Woodwoes. All of these characters were great. The politics of this story were awesome. Wag, Rob, and Winky. The other lion guy, Mike. Yeah, like, there was such a huge cast, and every character was really, really good. So, character-wise, no notes. You nailed it. Gameplay, really fun. I liked a lot of the boss fights. I liked Fluffy, even though he was impossible for me to beat ultimately. Were it not for my specific rule set and my specific challenges, I think I would have enjoyed it very, very much. So that gets a pass from me. And then story. Despite its length, and despite the bloat that I think it had, every character was used incredibly well. I think about Gareth and Percival. I think about Aurora, who makes a fantastic first impression, and then you realize just how terrible she is. I think about Oberon and the long con that he has going on. I think about the journey that Castoria goes through. I think about Morgan and the revelations around her. I think about Beryl and how despicable he is. I think about Pepe and his heroic sacrifice. Every single character in that story was used very, very well. The only one that I have a disappointment with is Baoban Shi, and I just wish she had something more than just falling in a hole. But that is a small complaint. Lost Belt 6, I think, very much earns its place as one of the most adored story chapters there is. Tunguska... I like Koyanskaya, and it brings me dark Koyanskaya, so I can't put it in a low tier. Like a low tier. I put it above Gardamarong, I put it above Solomon, yeah. Highest in C tier. Story was not interesting to me very much. Like, the concept behind what Koyanskaya fundamentally is novel. But whatever. And it being a raid was fun. I just really wish it wasn't a raid during literal Christmas when I was with my family. I do not want to be sitting here grinding Fate Grand Order when I'm spending the holiday with my loved ones. Come on, dude. Come on, dude. You can't do that. I love a raid event, but not when I have other things going on in my life. Sure, the devs can't account for when I'm going to have things going on in real life. Except for a major worldwide holiday. Don't schedule a major raid for that holiday. Terrible. Awful. Traum. Top of A tier. No, I'm going to put it in S tier, actually. Traum deserves that. For the first time in years, Traum reignited my passion for Fate Grand Order. I was having so much fun with Traum. I was having fun with the characters, I was having fun with the gameplay, I was having fun with the story, and I mean active fun. I mean, I got home from work and I was like, yeah, I get to stream Traum today. I didn't feel that way with Lost Belt 4. I did not feel that way with Avalon the Fae. I did it because I wanted to get through the story, and because I was eager to see where it led, but I wasn't like getting home and like, yay, I'm getting to get more of this. I'm getting to have the fun gameplay. I'm getting the story. Trauma really, really fixed that for me. Maybe that's a consequence of where I was in life. Maybe that's a consequence of my health. I don't know. But I think the story and the gameplay definitely did a lot for it. I love the characters that we introduced. Young Moriarty. Don Quixote. Kriemhilde. They were very fun. And then finally, it's not on the list here, but if it were, Lost Belt 7 goes above Babylonia here. Lost Belt 7 is my favorite main story chapter, period. It had a perfect mix of goofball comedy. We had dinosaur soccer matches. It had a good mix of foreboding and fear and terror with Ort. It had a good mix of an interesting background that it's pulling from. I really like Aztec mythology and Mayan mythology, and the aesthetics were on point. The character design was excellent. The characters themselves nailed it. I felt so much, so deeply for Tepeyu and Wakchan. When Wakchan died, oh, how I grieved. When Tepeyu walked out to fight a losing battle, oh my god, how I felt it in my heart. It was just Tiamat 2.0, really, with all our allies sacrificing themselves to buy us time, but it's effective. It was very effective. And just like Tiamat, who she was the first beast that we fought, Ort was in a class of its own. Ort was something that we have never faced and never had any hope of beating in the first place. And it felt like a miracle that was earned. I feel like in Fate Grand Order, in its stories and in its main events, there is always some cataclysm that is waiting. There's always some big bad who has a power that we can never hope to defeat. We can never find a way to overcome this, except for right at the very end, when some Deus Ex Machina shows up, or some, you know, Chekhov's gun that was planted very early on comes out and is like, oh, this thing, we happen to have the perfect counter for it. And that's fun and that's very shonen. But when it happens every single chapter and every single event, it gets very rote and very predictable and very boring, frankly. Lost Belt 7, it felt earned, it felt deserved, it felt like we exhausted every single possibility. We threw everything, we sacrificed everything, and it still wasn't enough. And it was only through somebody else who was already there with enough power, sacrificing themselves, that we were able to overcome it. And maybe I'm biased because I was enjoying the event already, but it felt earned, it felt deserved, and it felt valid. I felt like, wow, we did it. I'm amazed we did it. Like, I felt like I belonged in that story, celebrating with everybody else. And that feeling doesn't come often in Fate Grand Order to me. Part of that is because of the gameplay too, because of the Ort fight, which, what a masterpiece, dude. That was so cool. I've wanted something like that, some unique, exciting gimmick in Fate Grand Order, and the Ort raid delivered. So, yeah, Lost Belt 7 takes the crown as my favorite main story chapter. And that is the Fate Grand Order main story chapters tier list. I feel pretty happy with the distribution there. Honestly, I have more things higher rated than I thought I would. I was expecting more of this to be low, like C, D, E, but it really highlights for me why I've kept coming back, why I've played Fate Grand Order for so long, because honestly, it generally gives a pretty strong showing.